The reality is when the company was formed in 2014, it was a merger between Hall Systems and Learn on Demand. And the whole point of the name was so that our customers would look at it and go, oh, I get it, and I'm not scared. We didn't want to be something new. We didn't want to reinvent ourselves. We didn't want to tell a fundamentally different story. We just wanted to take the two companies that we had and go to all our existing customers and say, yes, look, we just smashed them together and now we're just better. And so that's where the name Learn on Demand Systems came from. Now we've tried, probably 3 times since 2014 to rebrand the company, but we never really followed through with it. So we've been toying around with this idea of we want to evolve into something different, but the timing was never right. It was a combination of having the right group of people, the right roadmap for the technology, and then for the industry itself to kind of be in a place where we felt like the industry was poised to advance, that was poised to do something new and something different. And it was the right time to rebrand, to redefine the company, and to kind of start pushing our version of what that is forward. And so, over the past 2 years with COVID, as many of you know, we've seen this rapid acceleration of transformation in the IT education space. The days of instructor-led, going in classrooms and for 5 days at a time, or even online 5 days at a time, the days of investing hours and hours and hours into watching endless videos and following detailed lab instructions, and just investing that massive amount of time into just reading things, memorizing facts, taking multiple choice questions, those days are past us now. The acceleration and the transformation that's happened in the last 2 years has been astonishing. And there's kind of a new expectation that I think learners have, and that companies that are trying to more rapidly evolve the way they think about this, that makes them poised to take advantage of some of the new methodologies, the new thinking, sort of the next evolution of what IT training and education is meant to be. So the timing is really good for this, and what I want to do is share kind of our philosophy behind it. And so this first little section are things we fundamentally believe. And if you think about, well, why do you care? This gives you, I think, a lot of insight into directionally and thematically where we're going in general. So first off, right, we believe that the future of training is skilling. And this is very important. There's a saying that we have, and you might see it occasionally with some of our materials. Skills create abilities, and abilities create opportunities. It's no longer about learning facts. It's about developing skills, right? Can you answer the question, what can you do? When we interview people for jobs, what can you do for us? What can you what abilities do you have? Can you, code a data science model or a machine learning model or an AI model? Can you build a web app? Can you build a service? Can you deploy a data center? Can you manage a cloud? What are the abilities you have? And the combination of skills create those abilities. And so we believe that, as the world moves forward, there's going to be a rapid and fundamental transition away from training into skilling. You already see this in various places, but I think that transformation is only going to accelerate. So skilling is the future of training. And we have to reorient ourselves around this notion that I'm not there to train a person, I'm there to give that person a skill. And if I successfully do that, then everybody benefits. The second thing is we believe that hands-on experiences will be supplemented by video, not vice versa. Today, when you take training, you consume a bunch of content, you practice it a little bit, and then you take some sort of assessment. The primary the primary method by which you're gathering information essentially is videos and instructors. And we believe that the labs come at the end, and we believe that's going to flip. And we're already seeing some customers begin to adopt this model where instead of saying, hey, you want a new skill, let's watch 40 hours of video, or let's listen to 40 hours of lecture, let's put you in the environment on day one, and let's figure out where you fail. And if we figure out where you fail, we can figure out where we need to build, and where we need to add, and where we need to grow, and where we can build and help you acquire those new skills. It's faster and it's more efficient, right? And there's all sorts of science and theory behind the fact that adult learners in particular, it's a better approach for them. Now, the technology, generally speaking, hasn't been ready for that until the last year or two. So we're pretty excited about this. And we're seeing some of our learning partners already lead with the lab, supplement with the video, supplement with the mentor, supplement with the asynchronous collaboration. And we think that's a really, really good way to go. We did a press release on a new partnership we have with BenchPrep, where they're adopting this model, a 70-20-10 learning model, where the initial 70% is all about the experience, right? So already people are adopting this model and migrating to this model. The third thing that we fundamentally believe is that you need an instructional design model to revolve around this, right? So we can't just say, hey, lead with the experience. There's got to be some structure around it. And that structure is challenge-centric learning, right? Now, we've been tossing around this term for a while. We're going to talk a little about our challenge labs here in a little bit. But challenge-centric learning is the notion that you're not consuming information, you're continuously challenging yourself, you're continuously evaluating whether or not you succeed in those challenges, and you're continuously finding room for improvement and growth, right? That's the premise behind challenge-centric learning. And we're going to put a lot of effort, and for any of you that want to help us with this, we're looking to form a couple of industry groups. We're looking to, make this not something that we buy ourselves, mandate or dictate or drive, but as a collaboration between the more forward-thinking organizations to say that there's not only is there a better way, but we're going to put some structure around that better way so that when we all adopt this model, there's a similarity, there's a common set of principles, there's a common set of guidelines that we all follow so that ultimately it's successful. That's challenge-centric learning. And we believe that this is the next major instructional design model that is going to drive this new wave of skilling. The next thing we believe, and this kind of ties back into this, is that the more real world that you can make things, the more effective they are. And so there's two things that we're going to spend a lot of time on, not here necessarily, but us as an organization. Scored labs and shared labs, right? So challenge-centric learning is the idea that, we're going to give you a challenge, but we need to know if you're successful, and scoring is how you determine success. So scored labs, critical, important piece of this. The next piece of this is shared labs. The idea that, when I'm in the real world, very rarely am I working alone. I'm working with a group, with a team, with with other individuals in different roles, and we collectively collaborate on a solution. And shared labs are our implementation of that model. So, for example, if let's say we have a scenario where I'm trying to validate that you can, let's do something simple, deploy a web database and storage app on Azure and Amazon, right? So the database is on Azure, the web app's on Amazon, some combination of multi-cloud sort of stuff. The idea of a shared lab is maybe 4 individuals collaborate on this, but they all have different roles working on the same shared solution, and we score that solution. So one person deploys the database, one person deploys the website, and they have to collaborate, but ultimately the lab environment has more than one person in it. And we can score the work of the group and even score the individual roles of the group. And these are all things that we can do today. They're just a little cumbersome at times with the way that we've currently got this solution built. But this is sort of one of the next innovation paths that we're focused on, is how do we make this whole process simple and easy to build not only these scored challenge-centric environments, but shared scored challenge-centric environments. And then what I believe is the final one here, performance-based testing is the future of certification and badging. We're seeing a shift in the testing industry at present away from multiple choice to multiple choice supplemented by, or in some cases 100% replaced by, scored labs in the exams. I've got a few statistics on this for you a little bit further down the road. But the accumulation of this, if you start tying all these things together, if the learning model is challenge-centric, where when you do things and we score it, then the assessment and validation model has to be challenge-centric. Likewise, if the assessment and validation model is challenge-centric, so does the learning model. And we've got customers that are working on really innovative solutions on both ends. We've got some that are focused on innovation in the testing space, where they're trying to bring scored labs into exams to replace or supplement multiple choice. Those organizations are now starting to push back into their training system, right, to now make their training more challenge-centric. We've got some customers starting on the training side, building challenge-centric learning in their core training, that now looking to evolve their skills validation, their badging, their certification, their testing programs to also model that. So it's an entire framework that you weave through the entire skills development and skills validation experience. So really fun stuff. For those of you watching the video, that cup of coffee was yesterday's cold cup of coffee. This was today. That's an unfortunate mistake. So moving right along, and this next little piece is I'm going to go through real quick. You kind of ask yourself, sort of, who are we and how do we position ourselves and what do we say we do? Our identity as a company is a skills development and validation partner. The thing I want you to take away from this is very simple. We're not a training company, nor are we a company that's going to be in the content space, right? That, we're not going to be a library of content that you can go buy where we're competing with, training companies and content platforms. Our goal is to be the skills development and validation partner. So we're the guys that power training companies, that help enterprise software companies revolutionize the way they do training. If you're a content company and you have a library of content, videos, whatever online, and you want to add challenge-centric learnings, scored hands-on labs, shared labs, we're the platform that's going to empower you to do that. And you can do that on your own through self-service. You can engage our services team, or we can collaborate on something together. But our goal is to be a partner to the largest training companies and enterprise software companies to help them realize the next version of what they're trying to do. Our mission as an organization, as I mentioned, increase opportunities through skilling. Skills create abilities, abilities generate opportunities. Those opportunities can be personal, they can be professional. It can be an individual advancing to a new job. It can be an organization capturing new market share because their sales team is more prepared as a result of a more efficient learning model that they put in place. All right, so our goal is, our mission is create opportunity. And then finally, and you may have picked up on this a little bit already, we believe that challenge-centric learning, right, which consists of validated experience, you can translate that to scored hands-on labs, is going to fundamentally transform the IT education industry in the next 5 to 10 years. And we're all in on this model, and we're building a tool set and a set of services and a set of capabilities that ultimately support this model. So what exactly is Skillable? If you look real close, and I'm going to segue for a little bit of a second, we're very excited to have this name. And if you kind of think about it, how the heck did this name, not already exist? I'm going to give you one small piece of trivia that to acquire the brand Skillable required a private investigator and a bar in Sweden. And if you ever meet me, at an event somewhere, ask me for more detail on it. I'll tell you the story. But it required a private investigator and a bar in Sweden. But ultimately, we're quite proud of the name. It's got skills, abilities, and labs embedded all throughout it. So it's a wonderful, wonderful representation of who we are. So we're kind of three things. One, we're a SaaS platform and a software company first and foremost. So we are at our core a platform. Secondly, we're a content creator and publisher. Now, I just finished saying we're not in the content business. We're not, but we have a library of content called Challenge Labs, and I think many of you are probably familiar with them, that we're going to talk about here in a second, that we build not for the purpose of, and this is going to sound kind of weird, we don't build it to sell it, we build it to drive innovation. Right? Yes, we sell it, and yes, we make some money on it, not very much, but a little bit. But we do it mainly to show what's possible, to push our own limits, to make our own platform better, and so that you as our customer have a really good starting place when you think about how you approach challenge-centric learning, because Challenge Labs represents our vision of what that could and should be. And then finally, we're skills development and validation ecosystem. And what I mean by that is we're putting great effort into partnering with some of the biggest distribution networks out there. Right now, as an example, our platform's integrated with, I think, 11 different marketplaces. And we're currently partnering with, or in the process of partnering with 11 different exam delivery networks, right? Some of them are very high stakes, think Pearson per metric. Some of them are more, targeted at corporate culture, think companies like Examity, for example. Also some virtual proctoring companies. So we're building this platform that's already integrated into the entire ecosystem. So when you build this type of content, or any content for that matter, and you want to reach learners, we've already laid the groundwork for you that makes it simple, right? If you want to take your existing training content, turn that into a high stakes exam, we've done the integrations already. The heavy lifting's been done. It's just a matter of publishing it to the right place. So these three things represent what it is we're trying to do. We are first and foremost a software platform and a SaaS platform. We have content that we use as a leading example of how we want our customers to think. And then we're fully integrated across the entire spectrum of the IT education ecosystem, whether it's in academia through LTI, whether it's corporate training, whether it's marketplaces and through the world's largest LMS companies, whether it's with the exam testing providers and delivery networks. All that work's already been done or being done. So let's talk about what we're doing. By the way, if you have questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. And if I see them, I've got it open here, and if I see them as best I can, I'll answer them. But moving from kind of theoretically sort of who we are and how we think about things to some of the things we're actively trying to solve. The current reality, if we think about hands-on training in general, click over here, there's sort of three fundamental problems that we're trying to solve and or make easier. The first one is labs. If you get download labs today, they're designed to work and not teach. Right. The biggest thing that some of our competitors in the lab hosting space say is, hey, our labs work really well. That's great. I mean, everyone's labs work, but they're not designed to teach. And so we're trying to encourage a design mentality where labs are designed to teach. They're always going to work. They have to work. If they don't work, you're doing something fundamentally wrong. But are they designed to teach? Right? Are they designed to make the person better for having taken the lab? The second thing is labs are typically not validated. Now there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors that happens around here because there are folks that say, "Ooh, we've got a multiple choice question at the end of the lab. It's scored." No, it's not. That's not a scored lab. A scored lab is when a script or a validation system runs and actually checks what you did to see if you were successful. You can't fake a true scored lab. You actually have to do the work, and the work has to be done correctly. And the third thing is labs are hard, right? And they are, but a big focus of ours is making labs easy, right? How can I make it super simple? And the way we think about this, just for some context, we think about this in terms of clicks. How many clicks to go from point A to point B? As an example, we released our template library last year, kind of our version 1 of our template library. And we went from about 60 to 75 clicks to build a simple lab and publish it to 6. So in 6 clicks, I can create a lab to the point where I'm ready to write instructions, right? So I can create an environment that's ready to scale up, and I can just go write instructions, 60 to 75 clicks down to 6 using our template library. And so this is a theme that we're weaving through the entire platform, is how do you do all these complex tasks in fewer clicks, right? If I'm on our website and I go, scored lab sounds kind of cool. Let me build a scored lab on Python. Let's see how easy this is. You should be able to do that in very few clicks. You should be able to go from an idea to a functional, scaled environment. And I'll share with you some of the ways we're addressing that now and some of the work that's going to be done in the next couple of quarters. So we'll break that down. Designing labs that teach. So how do you design labs that teach? Well, this is where challenge-centric learning comes in, right? Challenge-centric learning is an instructional design methodology where the lab is a teaching element, not a place where you practice something you saw in a video or a place where you just arbitrarily clown around in a sandbox. It's a place where you go to actually learn. And if you study adult learning, and we've spent a lot of time on this is how adults learn. Myself, for example, I have a teaching background. I started in the mid 90s as just a staff instructor for an old Microsoft. They were called CTEX back then, Certified Testing and Education Certified Training Education Center. And we would get these big Microsoft binders with 700 pages of slides and slide notes. And whenever I taught, I never followed that. I'd bring the students in on day one, and I'd say, okay, this course is about how to configure TCP/IP. Let's go build a network. And we'd start building a network. And I'd pair the weaker students with the stronger students. And when we hit a point where they were struggling, we'd crack out the book. And we'd do a module. And we almost never did the modules in the order that they were presented in the book. We did the modules when we hit the fail point. In the 5-day courses, typically we did way more than 5 days worth of content. And the feedback that I consistently got was, I want to go to Corey's class because I like the way he does it. We actually do stuff. We don't listen to a lecture and follow a bunch of instructions while the instructor searches the internet. We actually do stuff. So this whole methodology, challenge-centric learning as a concept is not new. And this whole notion of, just do it, see where you fail and build on that is something that fundamentally works for people. Now, we kind of talked about, where does challenge-centric learning sit in this whole life cycle? It sits in every phase of the skill development life cycle. So all the way from, the training side where you do pre-assessment all the way to the certification test on the end. You acquire the skill, you validate the skill. The result is the skill is durable. And if you aggregate skills, you generate abilities. And when you have ability, you create opportunity. You're going to hear me preach this, to anyone that will listen for the next, as long as I'm doing this, to be quite honest, because I feel like we're at the cusp where this is going to become, generally accepted, and then collectively, us as as an industry, we've got the opportunity to fundamentally transform and become better. So, Challenge Labs. A little bit about the product itself, right? So. We've been doing a lot of work on this in the last 6 to 8 months. You may, some of you may have heard that we brought on a guy by the name of Frank Gartland, who's our new product. Who's in charge of our Challenge Labs product, among many, many other things. And under his tutelage and leadership, we've vastly accelerated both the pace at which we produce Challenge Labs and the breadth and depth. And we're now looking at, what we're calling Challenge Labs V2, which is the next evolution of this product that brings in more challenge-centric learning concepts and ultimately creates something that we think is even more efficient than Challenge Labs today. So some examples of some of the new areas that we're pushing forward on: Python, MySQL, Kubernetes, Docker, Linux. Traditionally these things were typically Azure, Amazon, Windows type stuff. We're now moving big into data and computer science. Right, and those are new sort of areas for content. We've been traditionally very good at it's also an example, by the way, of how Challenge Labs pushes the platform to be better. We were traditionally, very good at IT Pro cloud type concepts. The next big landscape for us is code and data. And so Challenge Labs are pushing the boundaries on what we can do for code and data and forcing us to build better tools, better user experiences, better platforms. And we'll talk a little bit of this, more as we move forward. But more than 1,000 Challenge Labs in the library, and this is the exact same technology and experience that you find in many of the industry's leading performance-based certification tests. So, what are we doing on the Challenge Lab side? Well, here's some things we're doing. Number one, By the end of 2022, over 2,000 labs in the library. Our goal here is breadth and depth and also innovation. So we're doing this for a couple of reasons. One, anyone who's doing a performance-based test, we're gonna build challenge labs to help prepare for those exams, right? And you as a training organization or a software company, you can now weave those products into your existing learning solutions. On the depth side, we're trying to cover a lot of topics. And on the innovation side, look for challenge labs that are shared. Look for new and interesting scenarios. We're continuing to work on Google Cloud. We plan to release that in the new year. And then, as I mentioned, major investments in code and major investments in data science and analytics. So you can see some of the topics that are either in development today or going to be in development shortly. So things like Python, C#, Java, React, Ruby. On the data side, a bunch of different database providers, and on the data science, data visualizations with Tableau and Power BI, for example. So again, depth on the technology side, but also breadth in terms of the topics that we cover. And you'll see this term topic come up a lot as you sort of work through. That's how we begin to think about, how do we support different learning and use cases? We think about it in terms of topics. So here's an example of our Python experience. Now, for those of you that are on the little more technical side, all our Python challenges, and this is some new lab series, some challenge lab series we've released, they don't use virtual machines. This is all browser-based, Docker container-based coding environments, right? They fire up in a matter of seconds. They're responsive. They allow you to type the code in a full browser-based code editor, and then we can score the code as you go. Right? What are some new things that are coming in Challenge Labs? So a couple of things that are coming. Number one, VMs and containers combined together, right? We're pretty excited about this one because now we can have, for example, a Windows desktop with Visual Studio where you can write code but deploy it to container-based technologies like MySQL, for example, or vice versa. We're working on some new scoring reports, right? Today, when you complete challenges, you basically get a pass or fail. We've got a whole lot of new reports that we're building out that are going to become available to make challenges a tool to provide proper feedback for skills validation. And we're also experimenting with using this in areas like, for example, recruiting. So we've got some customers today that use challenge labs for recruiting to validate it that candidates have certain skills. And we're building reports to help give them a better view into how these candidates did at a very deep level inside all of these challenges. So some really fun and interesting things on that side. For lab developers, right? One of the things, or I guess two of the things, and I'm going to repeat these a little bit later on, that are new and or coming. One of them is our template library, as I mentioned. One of the mandates our Challenge Labs team has is every time they build an innovative Challenge Lab series, they publish the templates for that. So back to that example of Python, for example, we have templates in our Challenge Lab, or in our lab template library. I don't know if they're there today or not, but they're going to be there soon, that allow you to basically replicate our Python coding environment so you can write your own code and challenges against it. Right? So one of the objectives is make it easy to build labs. One of the ways we do this is we take our very best challenges and we turn them into templates that you can just customize and reuse. The other thing that's mentioned in here is our best practices analyzer. This is a new tool. This is not out today. We're currently building it. We're expecting it to be released early in Q1. But envision a scenario where you build a lab and you let a bunch of people do it. We can then go back in and run a best practice analysis on both the lab configuration and the data that's come back from all the learners, and give you recommendations on changes you can make to make it better. Right? Maybe, for example, one of the recommendations is, hey, you're giving people too much time or too little. Maybe one of the recommendations is, on step 4, everyone fails. You may want to check step 4. Right? Maybe, for example, it says, hey, your lab takes 9 minutes to start up. Here's a couple of simple tweaks that'll make it 90 seconds. right? So this is a framework that we're going to build and build and build on in the weeks and months to come and years to come, so that you as a lab author, you don't have to think about best configuration. You can build it, and we can give you recommendations through this best practice analyzer that give both the learner a better experience and give the lab author better guidance on how to configure it for performance. And then the last piece here is one of the things that we're working on is something we're calling managed metadata, which is the idea that as you build all these independent labs, there's data points that you can go in and configure that allow you to connect labs together. So for example, if you have 5 labs, today those are 5 individual labs and we can't sequence them. With these hierarchical collections and managed metadata concepts, which you'll hear more about in months and quarters to come, you'll be able to sequence labs. Some of you may or may not be familiar with a small technology we have embedded in the lab authoring tools now, which is called our outcomes engine. Right now, today it's fairly simple, but outcomes essentially works like this. When you take a lab, and if you have a scoring element in the lab, I can change what happens next based on whether you pass or fail. So for example, and you know, feel free to raise your hand, by the way, for this one. Who's read a book as a kid where it's like a choose your own adventure book? So, you know, you turn to page 6 and you walk down the path in the woods and you meet the wizard, and, you know, do you cast a spell or run away? If you cast a spell, you go to page 6. If you run away, you go to page 15, right? Imagine that level of an experience in a lab. Deploy the database. You took too long. We're going to go to page 6 where it's easier to deploy the database. Well, you did that in 4.5 seconds. We're going to go to page 16 where it's harder or more complex. You can do that today, right? That has been live for months now, inside of Lab on Demand, inside of the activity-based assessments editor, this notion of outcomes. Well, we're extending the notion of outcomes to say, if you go through lab 1 and you scored correctly, you go to lab 2, which is a harder version. If you scored incorrectly, you go to lab 1A, which is an easier version, and we try again. So this idea of sequencing, not just within the experience, but sequencing entire strings of labs together and allowing you to navigate that path based on the outcome of the previous lab. So really fun stuff, and stuff that we're particularly excited about. So the second challenge, right, that we're ultimately trying to solve and really push forward on is you know, labs are difficult to score. I went ahead a little too quick on that one. Labs, ensuring labs can be validated easily. So I'd mentioned kind of, you know, performance-based testing, right? So PBT is the idea that we have an exam, and the exam no longer is just multiple choice questions, is now supplemented by scored labs. Well, this is really taking off across the industry. And so you can kind of see right here some of the work that we've been doing. We've been working in this space for about 4 years. We have 45 certification tests that are in production today that are PBT enabled, that we support in 13 languages. We have 20 customers. Right? These are big software companies or training companies that are actively building PBT enabled exams. Most of those exams will land in 2022. And to date, we've had over 450,000 exams worldwide that we've supported. So this is not a new concept to us, but the idea of scoring, right, and sort of scoring hands-on labs and embedding those in certification tests is still a new concept across the industry. Although, you know, with 20 companies actively working on this right now, it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be uncommon for much longer. So if you're not considering this, you might want to think about it. And we know how to do this. And you can see from the evidence, we've been doing this for quite a while. It's hard, right? It's not easy to build high stakes scored exams. We partner with a couple of exam development organizations that specialize in this. And we also do it ourselves, right? We have a services team that knows how to build scored labs that can help you accelerate your path towards performance testing. So take a look at it, talk to whoever it is that you talk to, and see where you want to go with this, right? So we're particularly excited about this. So what are we doing in terms of validation and scoring? A couple of things, right? Number one, traditionally we have scored using PowerShell and Bash. In the past couple of months, we've released a new scoring engine that supports virtually any language. So if you're more comfortable writing scripts in Python or C# or whatever language you prefer, you can write your scoring scripts in whatever language you want. And not only can you write them in whatever language you want, the version of the language is preserved. So for example, if you're scoring something in AWS, for example, and you need a particular version of the PowerShell provider, we will preserve that for the life of that scoring script. So every time you run the scoring script, you get the right version of that the two are bound together. If you want to write for another virtual machine, you want to write something in C#, you can write it in C#. So virtually any language you want, you can write the scoring scripts. We're building, as I mentioned, some new consumption scoring reports, and then we've done some work and are continuing to do some work on our infrastructure side to build more reliability into high stakes labs. Conceptually, and this is it's always an interesting conversation when I have with customers. The broader platform as a whole treats a lab as a somewhat disposable item, right? If you're, it's a training lab, you're doing it for 30 minutes. If something happens and you got to restart it, well, that's inconvenient, but it's not that big a deal. In the case of high stakes labs, like those used in certification tests, it is a big deal. And so we've got some new infrastructure that we're rolling out that's incredibly resilient to support these high stakes lab instances. It opens up other use cases like critical demos as well. So it's something that we're excited to get rolled out, and I think is going to be only help people feel comfortable adopting labs in these high stakes tests. And then we're also working on some logic on the back end that's included in the score reports that uses some AI and machine learning to identify patterns of cheating. Right. So I'll give you a very simple example of how we think about this. Let's say that, for example, we have a lab and an exam, and let's say that lab and an exam is run, 100 times over a month. We can identify the pattern of keystrokes and mouse input that is normal for someone that successfully completes that lab. And if we have a lab instance where the pattern of keystrokes is abnormal, we can flag that. So for example, in the course of, 20 minutes in this lab, maybe it's a, fairly even disbursement of mouse clicks and keystrokes. And then we've got one where it was, 30 seconds of furious keystrokes and typing, and then nothing else for a few minutes, and then some more at the end. Well, that's an abnormal pattern. Maybe someone was downloading and running a script of some sort, right? Maybe they were replaying keystrokes in some way, shape, or form. But there are the point being is there are things we are doing in ways of finding patterns that are abnormal, that in high stakes testing, it can be useful data points for someone that's evaluating what's happening on the back end. And then finally, as I mentioned, Challenge Labs is a template for PBT, right? If you're looking at wanting to begin creating scored labs and exams, look no further than the Challenge Labs library. Take those and replicate it. Right? Our expert challenges are, structurally what you experience when you take a PBT exam. Here's a scenario, here's a set of outcomes, do it all, no hints, no tips, no tricks, no nothing. When you're done and you're confident you're done, click score and we'll tell you if you passed or failed. Right? That's what an expert level challenge is. That's what scored labs and exams are. And then the second challenge number, so challenge number 3, my bad, is what are we doing to make it easier to build and scale labs? So a little bit of insight into kind of how we're thinking about this entire life cycle. Today, if you look at this 5-step process, choose your topic, choose your template, customize your template, choose your use case, and publish it. Okay. If I choose my topic, right? So the one that we've done really well today is selecting the templates. We have a template library. I'm only building that template library out. Start to kind of set your framework around this sort of a mindset. I want to build a lab on what? Don't think about, is it a Hyper-V lab, a VMware lab, an Azure, Amazon, Docker? Don't think about the implementation of the lab. Think about the topic. I want to build a lab on data science. Okay, great, choose the topic. Here are all the templates that contain the tools for data science. Here's one for Azure, here's one for Amazon, here's one for, here's one for VMware and Hyper-V, and then here's the difference between the two, right? All good, you choose the template. You think when you customize your template, right? Add your instructions, bring in your scoring scripts, bring in your rules, and then finally you go, well, what's my use case? And I just made a typo in that slide. So what's my use case, right? Here's how we think about use cases. Is this for an exam? Is this for a training class? Is this for publishing on a website as part of an online content library? Right? These are examples of how we think about use case. And when you think about a use case, there's a set of parameters that govern that use case. For example, if it's for a class, then we allow saves from day to day, maybe, right? If it's for an online website, we probably don't allow saves. If it's for an exam, we probably hide a bunch of different things, right? If it's for a demo, we probably turn off all the timers that cause it to expire. So depending on the use case, the experience can be modified. And then finally, you publish it, which is how you're going to consume it. Are you publishing this to be consumed by API? Are you publishing this to be consumed by an LMS, yours or ours? And so taking this entire life cycle and capturing it in a single wizard that makes it as few clicks as possible to go from point A to point B, right? That's the mandate that our products and our development teams have been given for the next 6 to 12 months. You're going to see incremental improvements on that as we go through. And then some improvements for lab authors that are both live today and coming in the very near future. We talked briefly about the Lab Best Practices Analyzer. One that's live right now, and this one's a bit of a tease because this is live for us, right? But it's not live for you. This will be live for you probably in Q1, is what we're calling a consumption rules engine. Backing up for a second, choose your use case. If it's a demo, turn off the timers. If it's for a classroom, turn on save, right? If it's for an online website, turn off save, but apply a different theme, right? Or if it's for, instructor-led versus self-paced, modify the instructions. The consumption rules engine, which, it's live now and we're using this internally, so we're going to use it for a quarter or two before we give our customers access to it to really get it dialed in, allows you to set rules that change the lab experience based on how it's consumed. So if you've ever been in a situation where you've had to build, you had to take a lab, you had to clone it or inherit it to a child for different use cases, this eliminates all of this. You can have one lab, and that lab can be consumed in a bunch of different ways. And depending on the way it is consumed, the API consumer, the LMS that's used, the way you tag it for a use case, you can now change characteristics of that lab. Things like whether or not you have timers, things like whether you allow saves, right down to the UI look and feel. And this is a framework that we're going to continue to build on, like our best practices analyzer, so that you can have one lab with vastly different user and learner experiences just based on where they come from. And you don't have to have multiple labs for multiple use cases. This is an incredibly powerful tool for those, those organizations that have more complex setups. For example, if you come in, we can detect the language and change the language is another example. So there's a lot of real neat things in there. For lab authors as well, VM tiers is a new concept we're introducing. So if you've been on a cloud provider, you deploy a VM on Azure, Amazon, you pick the tier, and the tier has the recommended configurations of network card, storage, RAM, CPU, et cetera, that are already kind of pre-optimized. We're moving to that model for our lab developers, which is the idea that, instead of you going in and building virtual machines, you can just choose the tier that you want, and we've already pre-optimized everything. Again, just less steps, less UI, less clicks, less everything. And then finally, improved timers for tighter control and protection. The way that the timer system works in the lab engine today allows, in certain cases, students to fundamentally, abuse things. And so we're putting some things in place that give the lab authors far more control over things like, when a person actually gets kicked out of a lab because they're out of time. Today, you can extend and extend and extend and extend forever, right? And as a lab author, that's a horrible thing because it's a horrible user experience. Combining the best practices analyzer along with these tighter control options for lab authors, very, very powerful set of tools that ultimately are going to give the lab author more control over what the student can do, right? And the protections that the lab author can put in place. This is particularly true in cloud environments where, when a lab's running, you're running a build. So you want tight control over how long a person can run, how many times they can save and resume, whether they can extend timers, when they're ultimately forcibly taken out of the lab. And so we're giving you those controls. Part of that as well is when we're in classroom scenarios, today we have this concept of retakes, right? In certain cases, you can, if you get a class for a lab for a class, you can retake it post-class, but there's no way to really tightly control how many times you retake it post-class. Well, there's now going to be some additional controls around that. And then finally, and I mentioned this previously, I don't like using the word wizards because it's very, 1996, but wizards to help you streamline the configuration process so there's less thinking you have to do, so you get from point A to point B a lot faster. If someone has a hand up, if you have a question, just throw it in the chat window for me and I'll try and get to it. And that way, if I can't get to it, there's lots of smart people on here, way smarter than me that can get to it. So a few other quick notes as well for lab developers. 2 new data centers, right? VMs are still, despite my best efforts to get rid of VMs, still a growing segment of the types of labs people build. So we have 2 new data centers coming online. We have Singapore, which is coming online this year, which is going to serve as APAC. It's going to supplement our Australia data center. It's going to be a full service data center that we're going to grow substantially. We also have US East 2 coming on in Q1 of next year. So US East 2 is going to be in the Washington, D.C. area. Again, we're building that one because we get tremendous latency and replication benefits. So as you build content, we can more rapidly replicate that content worldwide. Google Cloud is coming next year. I had mentioned an overhaul of our VM storage fabric. This is to introduce additional redundancies specifically for high stakes lab instances, right? So that, in the event of some underlying storage issue, those types of lab instances don't fail. They've got additional levels of redundancy. And then something we're excited about, there's a fairly healthy population of lab profiles that have a virtual machine for no other reason than to get a web browser. Asking the person to use their local computer's web browser is a risky thing to do because you don't know how it's configured, what's going to work, what's not going to work. So many people, provide a virtual machine with some tools in it so that you can have a predictable web browser. We've got some scenarios where now we're replacing that with containers instead of virtual machines, right? The result is things run faster and they're easier and quicker to build. So there's a lot of broad improvements for lab authors in general. Here's the map of our data centers, both current and planned. You'll see that APAC's on there, and you'll see that US East 2 is noted in there. And we've just done some pretty big upgrades. I'm not sure if we announced it or not. In EU North, got a big chunk of new servers in the last couple of months. So massive capacity upgrade there. So real fun stuff. We're kind of proud of our little network of data centers worldwide. So with that, the last thing I'll leave you with is, again, for lab authors, but also for the folks that are what's the word I'm looking for? The business decision maker type within our customer organizations. We're introducing, and to some degree have already introduced, a new simplified pricing model and billing structure. Something to talk to your sales rep about, but we now support the notion of an annual contract value. So if you're a lab developer, feel free to tune out. If you're a business decision maker, feel free to tune in. You can now work with us to decide, hey, I'm gonna spend, let's call it $100,000 on labs in the next 12 months. we can set that contract for you. We'll bill you equal increments every month, so the billing is predictable, right? Highly predictable, fixed billing, the same every month, works really well with budget cycles. This has been a model a lot of our customers have been asking for quite a while. We just had to do some work on the back end to get our systems to support it. And then as you work through, we'll track your actual usage. And when you've exceeded your yearly contracted amount, you're not paying overages. You're just paying the full contract amount every month, equal billing. When you reach that point where you've now spent the entire contract value, you can upgrade to a new contract to get a deeper discount, or we'll figure out the right path forward for you. And then with this new model, we're bundling in services, we're bundling in potentially premium support plans. There's all sorts of fun things we're doing. So from a contracting standpoint, this is a vastly simpler way of engaging. It's not a matter of pay as you go and see what the bill is at the end of the month. You now have predictable yearly billing, and we bundle in our most common and sought after services and plans. And the bigger you go, the bigger the discount. So with that, that about wraps us up for today. I'll leave you with a couple of screenshots of our team. This is a growing team. We've hired, I think, 30 people in the last couple of months with plans to hire a lot more. And this is all thanks to the work that our customers are doing and the growth that our customers are seeing in the last year. COVID's been transformative. The industry is transforming. It's only accelerating. And some of these concepts of challenge-centric learning, right, of scored labs and shared labs being the next thing that we move towards, of putting the experience first and the supplemental second so that we retain more. It's faster, it's more efficient, it's less maintenance cost. We're seeing a lot of people start to adopt those, and it's pushing us to be better. So thank you for that. So with that, we'll wrap it up. We are Skillable. You are too.